Hi, everyone. I think we've got people joining us online, or they will be imminently. But yeah, very excited for today. Obviously, Hopin is one of our awesome portfolio companies, and I'm sure most people have heard of Hopin by now. Obviously, seen incredible growth in 2020. Now valued at 7.75 billion from their latest round. And I think what's been the most exciting is just the incredible team that Hopin has been building around them, one of whom I'm delighted to have joining us today, very early from the West Coast. So thank you again, Anthony, for getting up early to be here with us. But Anthony is CMO of Hopin, the leading virtual event and digital experience company. Anthony just has the most amazing wealth of experience. I think one of the real things we see here at Seedcamp is we have a lot of companies in the B2B space and always sort of thinking about actually like, what does category creation look like? How do we build strong, compelling brands in B2B? And Anthony is obviously leading the charge at Hopin, where he's been for 7 months, but also has amazing experience as the CMO at Front and also founding CMO of Gainsight, where he's credited with creating the customer success category. So we want to have happy customers. So yeah, Anthony, very excited to have you with us today.
Excited to be here. Thank you.
Awesome. Okay, I'm gonna dive in with some questions straight away, if you don't mind, and then really want to create and take the opportunity to have people asking things in person and online for anyone joining us online on Hopin. So I'm going to dive in. Anthony, you very recently, as Hopin, launched the new mission. And, I think a lot of the time people think about, at what stage in a company do you think about codifying, almost like the foundation, the mission, the purpose, all of these elements. Can you talk to us a little bit about the thinking behind it, and where you landed and why it felt like the right thing to do now?
Yeah, totally.
So
in general, I think, there's no right time for this kind of thing. It depends on, kind of where you're at as a business. If you're, early stage, I think it's a foundational opportunity to do so and to indoctrinate why you started the business and the conviction you have behind the cause and the change you want to see in the world. So I think there's certainly a case to be made to do it early. And then on the but it's not too late, I suppose, as you're kind of further down in your operations and say, look, we need to really start, articulating what's been all along, like the truth that has been guiding this business kind of from the get-go. But I do think it's a critical thing to do because so often, especially in B2B, we talk a lot about functional benefit of our product. And that's important. Like we need to do product marketing. We need to talk about future benefit, all that sort of stuff. But the challenge is people buy things emotionally, and they put their support behind a brand, behind a company that they feel like they could see themselves in, that they feel somewhat inspired by, like it's a movement that they want to be a part of. And in the consumer world, we've understood this for years. There's a reason you would drink, forgive the example, Red Bull over Monster, let's say. At the end of the day, it's the same functional benefit, but you feel more like you're part of more one or the other. So I think this meta topic of brand, purpose-driven brand, is something that the consumer world has really understood for a while. And, we've sort of forgotten about that in B2B. We've said, we're selling to logos and not people, not humans. And that's not, necessarily the case. Well, it's definitely not the case. So at Hopin, and again, I've been here about 7 months. The company is, I think, better than I, almost 2 years old. So it's a very new business. Certainly 2020 has been kind of a, race for Hopin in terms of kind of building the product, in terms of serving the customer demand and all these types of things. So as I came on board, this was a chance for us to pause and take a step back and try to really understand what was our founding story? How can we take Johnny, our founder's story, and make it our story? And use that as the framework for our emotional benefit behind the product. So we were known as a virtual event company. In some cases, we still are today, hoping to shift that over time. But people didn't, there's many virtual event tools. Honestly, you can choose, several. But our belief is that Johnny's and I think some of you guys might know this, Johnny had a medical condition that actually kept him separate and isolated from the world long before COVID. And he wasn't able to engage in in-person events or community and all these types of things. And so for him, we sort of put words to the feeling of what he felt. And it was this idea that he wanted to feel closer. He wanted to feel closer to the people that he cared about, the communities that he cared about, the ideas and the inspiration, his teammates, all of these folks where there was this barrier that existed. And we look across our customers, today in the market in general, many of us have barriers that prevent us from participating in person. For me today, it's geography. I would love nothing more than to be with all of you in London, but there's a geographic barrier that I have to be able to participate. And yet here I am. I can feel just as close to all of you from across the ocean. So that's sort of the brand positioning that we've landed on, is that Hopin exists to make the world feel closer. And that's sort of we've launched it, but there's a lot of work to do for us to really go and build conviction in the market behind that.
I think, thanks so much for that, Anthony. I guess the beauty of the Hopin story is like how integral the founding story is to this then incredibly compelling and emotive, even though, we're talking about a B2B like SaaS business fundamentally, there is an incredibly like emotive element, that's underlying. Do you have any examples, or for those who perhaps don't have quite so compelling a founding story, like do you have any examples of, because I definitely see a lot of it, these missions and purposes that really you could apply to like 100 different brands. They just don't feel very real. Like how can people start thinking about, building this in if they don't necessarily have such an emotive story behind them?
Yeah. It's good question. I mean, I think there's, I think that the trick is to make sure it's authentic to you and not fabricate it in order to, I think behind the question here, a little bit of like, if we don't have an emotional driver behind the business, then, do we need to manufacture one? I think the answer is no. But I would ask, in almost any case, a business exists because there is either a persona or a group of people who are being underserved, or there is a opportunity in the market to drive some type of better outcome. So, maybe I'd build a case that there is something that is sort of a higher calling for the company beyond just selling software. At least I believe so. Maybe I'm super optimist in that regard. But one example maybe, and again, I'm drawing from my own experience here, was we just ran this process at Front before I left. And Front, got to, I think they're about 5 years in their run without this kind of core emotional benefit behind the product. It was effectively an email inbox, but kind of, it was more than that. There was this kind of desire to connect customers and teammates in a really thoughtful way, or employees and customers. And so it was, certainly the functional benefit was around connection between internal and external users effectively. But we started picking that apart and started getting down to like what's happening in culture. And this was again way before the pandemic, but we felt burnout. We felt like we were driving our employees to the ground, and that in order to achieve the ideal customer experience, we had to sacrifice the employee experience. And so that we looked for signal in culture, we looked for signal in research and what folks in the market were talking about, analysts, and we kind of found that meta trend around burnout and employee satisfaction, all these types of things. So I think a part of it, and by the way, where we landed was that Front, oh my gosh, I'm forgetting it now, but something around like we're building the heart of business, we're powering the heart of business, and we wanted to carve out that space of the heart of business being that place where teams and customers intersect. And the visual representation of that is the inbox. Like that is actually where your team and your customers kind of meet. And we want to go bring that to market. So the reason I'm sharing that example, it's very functionally led, and it wasn't apparent that up to 5 years of the business existing. And we went and ran a process to look at what was happening in culture, what was happening in different places, and then bring those insights in to the founding team and to the leadership team. So but the ultimate test is, does it check? Does it check out? Does the founder believe? Does the, ultimately can the team get excited about it? Can we rally our employees behind it? Is an authentic reflection, because it shouldn't be something marketing creates off in isolation. It should be something that marketing reflects, like holds up a mirror to what the company already is.
That's super interesting that was something that was like 5 years down the line in front, whereas it's already something that like super early in the inception of Hopin is what you're looking at. What was obviously we sort of know that you guys have had incredible growth, and obviously nobody was expecting, I think we definitely believed that Hopin and what you guys were building was really onto something, but super accelerated by, little global pandemic.
Yeah.
How do you think, or can you talk to any experiences you've had in terms of with the different founders you've worked with? And, very often you're dealing with quite technical or often like not very sort of marketing or like brand sort of savvy founders. How have you gone about the process of almost selling in the value of this, and then how do you think about measurement on an ongoing basis?
It's true. I've definitely worked with founders that are kind of like secret marketers, I think, at the end of the day. And then I think most notably at Front and now at Hopin, very product centric founders where they sort of have to sell the vision behind why should we even invest in brand, let alone, kind of shift the marketing strategy and focus into a whole new arena. I think a part of the reason, or on the marketing side, it kind of makes sense. Like if you're a go-to-market driven founder, you're like, look, I understand that sales needs a story that they can tell to customers. We need to build a content marketing machine around our broader purpose and brand in order to drive leading indicators to growth and grow our funnel activity. I'll get to that part in a second. So there's sort of this concept of like I understand that brand drives pipeline at some way, shape, or form, and so we need to do that. And there might be existing ideas that kind of help or anecdotes from their experience that help drive that. The product side, and this is not judgment. I know there's probably many product-driven founders on this call, so please don't take it this way. But I think there's a belief that product solves everything, and in a big, and maybe I'm generalizing here, forgive me if so, but I think that there's a lot of truth there. I think there's a ton of truth to that. You can't have this like massive emotional like story and then no wood behind the arrow, nothing to back it up. And the product has to be obviously a huge part of the value proposition for why the company exists. I mean, come on, otherwise it's a nonprofit, right? Like effectively, not even, like, I don't even know what you are. You're a marketing agency, I guess. So point is, I think the way I've sort of told the story, and it hasn't been this like uphill battle necessarily, but it's the idea that brand can amplify product value. Brand can help us both amplify and set context to the core value proposition of the product. Why? It answers the why question, where product so importantly answers the what and the how. But the why question is sort of gives us a true north or a rudder for the roadmap and for the new capabilities and a big part of how we sort of develop our product strategy in general. Beyond that, it helps us build a moat around the product because we can build a community and get people who are passionate about the technology, but are also passionate about the broader vision and kind of where we're headed and are inspired by that. They're drawn to us because of that. And they almost like come for the brand, they stay for the product, right? And then they end up advocating and being customers for life. So I think if the former case is this push that brand drives pipeline, I think the idea that brand drives loyalty and retention and adoption and usage, that is kind of a big part of the proposition to product. So coming full circle to your question, how do you measure this? This is, I think, the difference between B2C brand and B2B brand. And there's, by the way, this is kind of a highly debated topic, but on the consumer side, they'll say, we're going to run a brand tracking study. You're going to spend several $100,000 with us. We're going to build a composite score based on social media sentiment and all these things. But if you're a 10 to 20 person like B2B SaaS startup, like come on, like that's not even close to on your radar of doing. So from my experience, fundamentally, you have to point to both of those camps that I just mentioned, the revenue outcomes that you drive, the funnel activity that you drive, as well as adoption and usage. So this shows up quite a bit on the pipeline side. So I would file content marketing as fuel of building a brand, like in terms of blog posts, ebooks, like SEO, like all of the things that are sort of the engine that makes a brand, that helps build that brand. Events, obviously, all of these things are measurable. All of these things have a component of enrolling net new audiences into your marketing automation system, engaging existing prospects and customers. Maybe these are part of a nurture program that ends up flipping a cold contact into an opportunity or an existing opportunity into a deal. We have the opportunity, we can measure that, and we can see how leading with thought leadership, leading with education and value and not just functional benefit can actually drive those pipeline creation and pipeline acceleration motions that help you justify why did we do this in the first place? We hit our number because of that event we did or that webinar or whatever. And on the product side, I think very similarly, especially as these things are catered to customers, can you drive self-serve adoption? Can you drive you have a new feature coming out? How can you really leverage the brand story to help kind of contextualize the new capability? Those things can help drive kind of some of the adoption outcomes too. So that's, I think, ultimately, if I can answer it simply, measurement and proving impact, taking a little bit of a trust card maybe in the early days when it's hard to see see that stuff come to life. But I think that's kind of how I would position it to either.
Yeah, I think the trust bit is definitely key. And I think at the early stages, it's so tough, right? Because everybody wants to feel like, the pressure to measure everything within an inch of our lives versus also knowing like there is an investment in longer term like strategies, of which brand is always going to be one. But your sort of answer made me, want to lead on, I guess, to the idea of lead generation. And, you talked about things like content and events, but in the early stages, and obviously, again, Hopin is a slightly unique case because a slightly bigger team and budget than many of the people who'll be on this call today. But how do you think about sort of when you're starting a campaign, like how many of these different tactics do you start building in at any one time when you are, resource constrained? And particularly, I guess, in, for B2B SaaS, where do you recommend people start?
Yeah. I think there is new in the earliest days of setting something of doing this early. And I appreciate, again, you may or may not even have a marketer on staff. You may or may not even have, someone to really go in and shepherd this and lead it. But especially in the early days, like, let me put it this way, I can come in having run the process before, later stage, pull in an agency, spend $500,000 and figure out, our brand story. But this Johnny, or our founder, or you as founders, you have the story in your head. And our job would just, as marketers, would just be to extract it from your head and maybe help put language. And obviously, it's a huge trade-off of your time. But we had to pull in Johnny and early stage kind of employees and things in because we were new. And anytime you work with a consultant or an advisor or whatever, you're going to have to do that. So I start there to say you don't need a marketer necessarily in order to start building the foundation of your brand in a very low touch way, which I'll address, and use that as your starting point for your content marketing strategy, which in its earliest days, again, is enough. Like, you don't need to build an entire kind of end-to-end demand gen program, but can you leverage the narrative of the problem set that you want to go and solve in a way that drives activity early? So I have a hack, and I think this has been something that I've talked to folks about before. I think has worked out pretty well. What you need to do is spend this was so much easier before flights had Wi-Fi, because you could just be like, take a flight, like a long flight, no Wi-Fi, and just write. Just open up a blank Google Doc and write a story about the problem that you're solving in the marketplace. And for folks that are creating new markets or new categories, you might be observing a problem that no one has observed before. So what does that manifesto look like? And again, this is language I think is or the content of which I think lives in obviously your head, and I'm sure investor decks and all these types of things. If you're disrupting a market, why is your unique vantage point, your unique solution, differentiated than the what's currently in the market today? So if it's just like a free form thought process, like whatever it is, 1,000 words, disorganized, that's totally fine. And then what we'd sort of wish or hope could happen is that we as marketers or a contractor or whoever can take the outcome of your writing and turn it into 12 points, 12 bullet points. So meaning our problem is we want to change, we want to, let me come up with something here. Build phones that don't break when you drop them, or indestructible phones. My phone just cracked, so that is the first example that came to mind. And you might talk about how we believe that technology should be more durable and long lasting and not be replaced every 2 years. And that's our kind of point of view on the market. And these are the 12 reasons why. And I'm harping on 12 because a marketer, and again, this could be a contractor, it could be a consultant, it could be a contract writer, an intern, I'm not sure. It doesn't have to be anyone super formal, can take that stream of consciousness and turn it into 12 blog posts, which then are 12 webinars, 12 field marketing dinners, whatever it is. And you're kind of seeing where I'm going with this. This is an annual marketing plan for your demand gen team, for your content team, based on that one, Saturday morning writing session that we were able to take and scale into a marketing program. So that's where I think this is kind of an interesting starting point, is that, again, you could be Hopin, you could be an early stage company, wherever. We need sort of the founder, the purest form of the story to start from the founder, and then we can scale it in kind of interesting ways. And again, the way you would then measure impact is hopefully all of these things end up driving pipeline impact in the earliest days.
I love that. I'm somebody who pretty much exclusively writes on flights, which is why I've probably only done 2 blog posts in the last year, because it's been limited moments. But I totally agree. When you have no other option but to sit and write, you'll be amazed kind of what can come out. It's super beneficial. How do you, Anthony, one of the things I know that you're a real expert on, and that I'd love to kind of get into in a bit more detail, is how you think about building out the brand and the positioning and the marketing strategy when you're creating a category versus when you're disrupting one. So i.e. with category creation, it's amazing because it's new, but also there's an entire market to educate. And so you've got that problem to deal with. Whereas when you're trying to disrupt an existing, people probably understand it, but they also think of 20 other businesses in that space, and you need to anchor 2 other people to even get recognition in the first place. So can you talk us through sort of how you see kind of the 2 different strands and how people can approach them?
Yeah, totally. And this was our experience at Gainsight. We, and I'd ask, does this resonate with anyone else? You go to start the business and you look around the competitive set and you're like, well, we don't really compete with them. I mean, kind of on the fringe, but gosh, we don't have any competitors or any direct competitors, I think. And then you start doing more research, wow, the press isn't really talking about this problem. There's no beat reporter for, this challenge that we have. Search volume is low around the, as you're looking for category keywords and those types of things. Gartner, Forrester, not even on their radar. They have no, coverage whatsoever of a problem. And so then you're like, wow, well, we've hit on something. We've hit on and what really ends up becoming I think is a new problem set that people don't even know they have. We didn't know getting in cars with strangers to go from point A to point B was even in the realm of, that was a bad thing, if we recall, 10 years ago, right? Now Uber and Lyft and ride sharing is like a core part of our lives. And you can go on, and there's so many others of these examples. So for many companies, category creation isn't necessarily an option. It's the only way through. It's like we have to go and create a cognitive reference in the minds of the market behind this problem that we're solving. Now, for other companies, and I don't want to glorify category creation necessarily, because it's very hard. And I would almost say if you cannot create a category, that might be better. And I say that from a place of having a lot of scars, great outcomes, but also a very long and kind of lonely journey to get there. A typical disruptor play is a lot more straightforward, right? There's an incumbent in the market that we can look to as a main competitor, and our solution offers a better price point, a better value feature set, whatever the case may be. So in the disruption playbook, a lot's been written on that. However, to answer your question, the tactics underlying these things are pretty much the same, with the exception of what you talk about, where on the category creation side, you spend a lot more time talking about the problem. And on the disruption side, you spend a lot more time talking about the solution. But at the very foundational level, and this is I almost see brand as the foundation, and category creation or disruption is like the two different kind of places you go from it. The core hypothesis is the same. We need to build a thought leadership position behind the business. We need to use content in order to be the vehicle by which we get the word out. And so that content is obviously inspired by either the problem or the solution. But there's this almost like relentlessness we need to actually create and distribute that content over time as you scale and as you build the business. And the reason is we want to carve out that space in the minds of the market where they're like, oh, okay, wow, parking is a problem, and driving and car ownership in big cities is an issue. And, we have to start talking about that. And so I'd encourage you for your businesses, what are the things that, that are the conversations we need to either start or amplify to help pave the way for the solution. The second piece of that is community. It's nearly impossible or very hard, if not impossible, to be a single brand in the world trying to inspire and educate the market into a void where no one is saying it back to you. Johnny, I'm just using our context, but Johnny could have told the world about virtual events 5 years ago, and everyone could have been like, that's fine, but we don't want to do that, right? We don't think this is a problem set. We miss in person, whatever. And we've felt a very real thing now. And we have, a industry of event organizers, an industry of speakers, of venues and hospitality kind of, agencies and all these types of things who really kind of have felt our shared kind of pain here around this problem, and they're validating it back to us. So I think there's nothing more important than finding a community that you can wrap around the business that helps validate the pain that you're expressing. And so the way you do that, I mean, again, a little biased, but you can tell from some of these photos, biased even before Hopin, is events, because there's something about this. So there's something about a shared experience where people are brought together by a common cause, which in this case is building companies and building businesses in the earliest stage. That binds us together as people. And we're, in many cases strangers, but hopefully we leave this a lot closer because we've been able to kind of, commiserate on the pain, share stories, and, kind of build this relational kind of equity that is very hard to do over a blog post. So I think those are two of the major components. There's several more. I can talk your ear off on it, but I think that if you can really use content and community as a means of both educating and activating your brand, whether you're creating category or disrupting one, you're sort of building IP in the business beyond just the product set. And that IP is very hard to commoditize or steal. Meaning if it's a feature war or like a spreadsheet battle against the competition, that's always going to be sort of the, an ongoing issue. But what the competition can't take from you is your community. That's a very hard proposition. And so I give a lot of intrinsic value to the community you're able to capture along the way.
Yeah, I mean, community it's really interesting from a marketing perspective. It's something that sort of over the last few years now is like integral, like even in the investor pitches and stuff, when people are talking about what they're building, community being integral. I think people often underestimate that it needs quite a lot of, like stoking and investment to actually build a genuine, like valuable community that's going to grow and sort of stay loyal to you over time. I'm going to ask one more question and then I'm going to open up to people here and also online, but that is just around, I guess, your team and how you're thinking. And, we can talk about Hopin, but in the past and at Gainsight and Front as well, what have been, the kind of key early hires you've made to kind of bolster out the marketing team and why sort of in the specific areas that you've brought them in on?
Yeah, absolutely. Hopin's kind of a contra example in that it's been kind of like a hire everyone as fast as you can type of mentality, which is weird and then will not last forever. And I couldn't think of another example ever in my career where that's been the case. Marketing is where the red pen comes out every quarter, every year, and things get reconsidered. So, I would start here. I would say, first of all, if you have a head of marketing on board already, or if you're looking to hire one, what does that profile look like? And I think that there's sort of really two areas, maybe three, that a marketer can serve, and rarely can they do both. And I say this at the top level. That is a brand or narrative kind of driven head of marketing, or a demand and growth driven head of marketing. You could argue product marketing is a third, but I think the narrative kind of muscle is sort of kind of captures that one. And so every company is different. The context for the business is different. But I think that's sort of the decision number one, knowing that you can't have both. I think that's the truth. So for myself, hopefully you can tell probably by this conversation, very brand driven, very crazy ideas, big, how can we challenge Dreamforce next year and build the biggest event in the world for B2B SaaS? Like those types of convictions that don't make their way into the budget in a rational way, that are kind of just anyway bigger conversations internally. So point is, I think that depending on the business, maybe there's some value to finding someone that's the dreamer, that can dream big and can kind of pull the rest of the company along. In other cases, we need a very technical kind of sale. We have clear product market fit. We just need to go after and build the engine and go and win. And that's where you might find a demand oriented head of marketing. And so hire number one is the other role. So if, for me personally, like I needed a strong lieutenant in demand gen. Otherwise I was going to be in trouble effectively, right? Like my success would be limited. Now, the reason for that, and I frankly, again, I'm biased with my own lived experience, but I think that works pretty well. I think demand is sort of a learned trade, and you can get better, you can study up on it, you can go to the events and all these types of things, where there's sort of the I think there's a lot of other things, kind of components to the creativity and other pieces that are less learned and more kind of experienced. So the other piece to consider is that both your head of marketing and your demand leader have to be hands-on in the early days. There's no room for ego. There's no room for expectations around we're going to build a team and all that. It's like, we need to come in and go from 0 to 1. So I'd find someone that is very comfortable kind of building and excited about building and all of the, big kind of challenges and joys that comes with scaling an early stage business. I've told over the years, over the course of my experience, I've hired like more big company folks and found that they've struggled relative to folks that sort of have been through the ringer in the startup world. So that'd be hire number one. I think hire two sort of depends, right? It depends on where you're at. I talked a lot about content today, and I think at some point you need someone that can write or execute the content strategy. Those are roles oftentimes that can be contracted out. But if you were to, but they're also relatively junior roles. If you wanted to bring on one content marketer or content writer who can, really scale the throughput of the business, because then what you have is your demand marketer that could configure your marketing automation system, like work with sales, you build the decks, like all that sort of stuff. And then the content person can just churn out, content to kind of push through the channels. The only other thing I'll say is having agencies in the early days has been my experience for every company so far. And then the path is eventually insource. The ambition is to insource everything over time. And so you don't need to hire like a paid media person early or an SEO person necessarily. Again, depends on your product and company. Those are things that you can contract out, website development, those types of things. So I think, we were pretty dangerous at Gainsight with a demand leader, a content person, and eventually the next role was a events person for us. So again, on the execution side more than a leader. And that group of 4 got us about 2 or 3 years into Gainsight to about 10 million maybe of ARR. So I think you can punch above your weight with the right composition of your marketing team. And really kind of having the someone to look after the revenue and someone to dream the big dreams, I think is kind of the ideal mix.
I'm very with you on that. And I think it's definitely something that I see a lot more in sort of US companies or US companies building over here. And I hope to see more in kind of European businesses. Like fundamentally, there is not that one unicorn marketer who is genuinely an expert at both. You can find the person who can oversee the whole thing. But, as you say, Anthony, like you generally have somebody who is more brand and story and somebody who is going to drive the lead gen and things like that. And I see a lot of job specs for heads of marketing that I generally send back saying, this person does not exist. I'm sorry to burst your bubble. Right. Guys, I'm going to open up to any questions from the room if anybody has any for Anthony. Got lots of quiet faces. Any questions for anyone? Otherwise, I'm going to keep chatting. Yeah, Natasha? Yeah, go for it. I can repeat if you can't hear.
I'm curious, so almost 10 years ago when I was learning about marketing, there was a B2B playbook, right? There's the whole lead gen, you've got ebooks, you've got nurture campaigns, you've got events, and that doesn't seem to have changed much in the last 10 years. So I'm curious, we're a consumer brand, but there are a lot of parallels actually because we have a really high, barrier to decision making for a number of reasons. But what is the future of lead gen basically in your mind beyond what that playbook looks like today?
Great question. And one word in that as we're building this ability to scale long, after a lot longer than just the next couple of years. It is true. So a lot of the underlying mechanics of how a lead becomes a customer today are very much the same. So we are building a lead scoring model. We're building nurture campaigns. We're, all the stuff in that same playbook are still very present in how we go to market today. And again, I think that the nuance is really around how we're differentiating our content to stand out and all that sort of stuff. However, a day is coming, not very far from now, where we're going to live in a cookie-less future. And what does that mean? All bets are off. Everything we thought we knew about demand gen is going to be completely reinvented. And some companies, I think the companies that will survive this transition are ones that see it now and are starting to build for that world. And so the example that it was exciting. It was good validation to see Salesforce launch Salesforce Plus, because that's exactly what we're doing at Hopin and what we've been doing at Gainsight. And it's the idea that you need to imagine a world where you don't have access to privileged third-party data about customers. And you need to actually collect that data yourself and be the owner of it. So how do you do that? you build, again, everything we just talked about, content and a community to basically pull in insights on who is interacting with your brand online. So the way, very tactically, that we've seen that we're kind of getting there, and Salesforce Plus is a model of this, but on the consumer side, Netflix, all of these kind of content creators are basically saying, we're going to have a blog or an external facing media property where we're going to give away a lot of content. We're going to do it for free as an SEO play. We're going to use that as a way to discover folks into our world, but then we're going to gate a whole lot more. And it's going to be premium content. It's going to be exclusive content. It'll be shows and streams and all of these interesting things that go well beyond, again, just a typical blog post. Maybe they're even digital experiences that give you access to conversations. As I'm talking right now, we have an event with Simone Biles and Adam Grant today, where that could be something that we're like, hey, we want to give this away to you for free. Just give us your email and fill out this form, and you can be a part of this membership, basically, that you can get access to all this stuff for free. And by the way, some companies, I think Drift is a good example of this. I love that they did this a long time ago. They should get some credit as early pioneer of this. They even charge for content. Their content has become a product for them, as is their community and all these types of things. And in that sort of cookieless future, we need to think about our brand as a product, I guess, is one way to think about it, and use that to understand, okay, we have a new prospect that entered our universe. They became a subscriber of Hopin Plus or whatever. They're interacting with all of these content items, and they all seem to be about internal events, and their title matches that. Let's put them into the nurture program, and let's have somebody reach out if they reach a certain lead health score, lead score threshold. So I think that's where we're headed with all of this. It's the consumerization of B2B, if that's fair to say. And we won't be able to rely on things that we've long relied on in marketing. And by the way, I love it. I think it's a great challenge, and it speaks to me. I love the creative challenge of that and being able to stand out as a brand. And I think that for folks in this room and listening online, thinking about that as an inevitability 3 to 5 years from now will put you ahead of companies that are stuck in their ways and are heavily reliant on, third-party data and all these types of things to grow pipeline. And I think, hopefully can help you stand out as you kind of scale over the years.
Anybody online has a question, or anybody else in the room? I guess one more from me is when you're thinking about, because obviously, look, Salesforce is an amazing example. Hopin, even I'm thinking, Notion and their, very recent, massive, 10 billion valuation this week, all B2B companies, but all quite consumer facing in terms of the volume of people who are going to be engaging with it, right, on any given day, versus that one massive enterprise sale that's going to totally be a game changer. You need to just do a handful of them, and then it's done. It's amazing. But how do you think about kind of identifying the best advocate for the business that you're selling into, and the marketing messages or activity to kind of best get those people on board? For some, the obvious example that everyone always talks about is Stripe, right? And Stripe built for the developer, and they really just got that community so on board and realized that they could be the powerhouse to influence the people with the purse strings who would integrate them. How do you think about, or are there any tactics you have for identifying who those people are?
We're going through it, honestly.
Hopin was born in a year where everyone was a virtual event organizer. And so when you look at our database and we look, in our rear view, it's hard to understand our customer in a meaningful way, because there's a lot of noise in our existing database. There's, everything from, let's say, a VP of corporate events at a known brand who is what we would perceive to be our target buyer, to a small community organizer, or somebody's doing a wedding on Hopin, or something, very much a consumer use case. So we are on this mission right now to actually better understand our customer, better articulate who our customer ought to be moving forward, so we can focus and we can make sure that our campaigns, that our energy, that the products that we build, all of that is aligned around that persona. It's hard. And so some of the things we're doing, we are looking at our customer data and trying to draw some conclusions. Historically, we looked at top of funnel only, where we said, hey, like, when we look at people with event marketing in their title, that has a very high propensity to convert through the funnel. Versus, I don't know, the agency leads, let's say in our case, or whatever it is for you that might be kind of on the fringes. We used a lead scoring tool for that. We used something called Mad Kudu that helps us kind of pull that data. And we thought we had a pretty good profile built. Turned out that we had to look at our retention rates and our renewal rates and saying, okay, well, which cohort of customers actually renew? And we found that there was a disconnection in terms of what segment of the market these folks were coming from, specific titles, the types of events they hosted, which for us, you can file under like what use case basically somebody has with your product, and what was happening at the top of funnel, or what our perception of what was happening at the top of funnel was disconnected from our renewal rate. So so step one, I would say, is looking at the entire life cycle of your customer and trying to understand which cohort, which use case persona, whatever, can we draw a composite of who this person is and understand them better that way. And then next, honestly, spending a lot more time with those people in the market. And I think marketing has a huge role to play here. Certainly product does as well. Getting on the phone with customers and asking them these questions. I feel like beating a dead horse with this, but even if you're able to do thought leadership driven things and use that as almost market research with some of these people as well. So it's less of hey, we're launching a customer advisory board program, but it's, hey, we're doing an event all about this thing for you, and I'd love to invite you to be a part of it so we can learn and get a sense of your feedback, that sort of thing. So those are the types of things we're doing. There's also like, you can contract an agency that runs some of these processes for you, where it's like, hey, they'll do market research, customer interviews, win-loss analysis, all of that type of stuff. That will get pricey over time. And so I think doing this stuff in-house with the data you do have, and then being able to just get in front of the customer that you believe you have, some conviction behind, is a start. The only thing I'll add really quick is it's also possible that who you are going to sell to in the future is different than what your data shows. And so for us, we believe internal events are a big part of where we're headed as a company. And if you look at the buyer set, if you look at our data, like we don't have a lot of we don't have this like massive track record yet for internal events. And when I say internal, I mean like all hands meetings and workshops and team meetings and all that type of thing. And so that's again where marketing comes in, where we have to influence that. We have to, and product, by the way, do we have the right product for that audience? Do we have the right messaging that we want to go bring to the market? Do we have the right launch vehicles and the campaign programs to go and play the longer game of educating the market around this new market, around our value proposition? So that's also a big part of, I think, personally, where we are. It's what is our sweet spot today, and where are we going, and how can we calibrate internally between product and marketing and sales, of course, and success to go after these audiences.
Thanks for that. Got a question from Ben. Ben asks, how much are you influencing your brand position versus letting your users influence your brand positioning? So i.e. often this disconnect between what you think you're building and how you want to frame it versus what people actually want from you.
Totally. It's part of our process. So we try to hold ourselves accountable to not come in with a ton of bias into the program and sort of be a facilitator of the process. So we did a lot of stakeholder interviews early, both with Johnny and some early employees, as well as with customers. And we talked to a lot of them, and we attempted to pick apart the value that they were, or the kind of cultural reality that they were living in, to help us kind of drive that positioning. So basically, we did a bunch of inputs, market-facing inputs, internal inputs, and our job was to go and try to put language around that. And then we, before launching anything publicly, obviously had a number of reveals internally. Once we felt good about it internally, we brought it back to those same customers and got their feedback. And we did external launch first to our agency partners and some others. So it was almost this like slow drip of release before we went big. And all along the way, the hope was that whether you're internal or external, that you were sort of saying it back to us, like, yeah, this feels right, this resonates. I see myself as a customer or whatever in your mission. And once we got that signal, we felt pretty confident about going live.
Great. And I've got another question from Ben, which is, how do you decide how much money to invest into brand versus demand or growth?
Yeah. It's a really tough question. And I think we have to redefine what brand is when we talk to our CFO or our FP&A team, wherever, whoever makes the purchasing decisions on your team, so that I want to separate brand and corporate marketing, if I may, like to take a very B2B approach. Corporate marketing is like the swag and the trendy video and the, maybe even in some cases your conference, like things that are very tough to connect to, very tough to draw a straight line to growth. But I would argue brand programs that are like content marketing focused, that are around, again, just using the bias of a virtual event, that are very measurable, can be sent to your direct audience. You can rationalize those investments as part of your customer acquisition costs, as part of your kind of overall go-to-market. So if it's the corporate marketing stuff where it's like the big bets or kind of the nice to haves or that sort of thing, it's going to be tough, honestly, especially I'd imagine at the early stages to get that sort of buy-in. We want to do a sandwich brand video, in our first year and a half for $400K. Good luck, right? Like that idea. But if you are wanting to invest with a, contract content writer that's going to deliver a bunch of blog posts, that's going to really be focused on driving building brand equity, but also investing in SEO and some of these things that take a while to really mature, I would argue those are demand. You can debit that to demand, even though the spirit of what you're doing is kind of brand focused. So that's how I would rationalize it: is can I draw a line to where this shows up in the funnel, and how hard do I have to sell that? And if it's believable, if it's rationalized, if it makes sense and doesn't feel like a stretch, then I think it's a little easier to sell that story.
That makes a lot of sense. Asking one final time, any questions from the room here? Okay. Anthony, thank you so much for joining us. It's been hugely insightful. Can you just tell everybody how big the Hopin marketing team is right now?
Yeah. So I 7 months ago, I was market. We're at 48 right now. Not crazy.
Goals, guys. 48 marketers. Something to aspire. I'm getting a lot of like.
Yeah. I have that same
manage 48 people.
Now I gotta make them all 40 and all that.
Amazing. Thank you. I mean, it's a hugely obviously inspiring story with Hopin, and I think, look, amazingly huge team, but so much still to build and do. So an incredibly exciting journey ahead for you. Anthony, thank you so much for your time. It's been wonderful to have you. Do a little round of applause in the room. Yay! Thank you very much.
Everybody.
Speak to you soon. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.